Hey everybody, tonight we're going to be taking a look at the Lee slider. It's mechanical, it's made by Lee Studio, and it was something I was not going to buy, but I found for $30 used from a friend, and there's a lot not to like about this. So we'll talk about it, take it apart, try to figure out what's wrong with it, try to fix it, talk about the pricing. This could work for some people. If you really like this design, you know, you may be willing to put up with it, but are you willing to put up with it for the price they're asking? We'll talk about pricing, we'll talk about quality, we'll talk about what I think is wrong with this machining wise, and hopefully we'll get it into working order. Stick around. So like I said, this was bought from a friend, and I can't tell you where to buy it. You can go to AliExpress and search for Lee slider, Lee push. But you may find the version 2. Now again, I'm calling this the V1 because I have no other knowledge, and I need to differentiate it from the more recent one that came out because it appears to be a different construction. So this I'm calling the V1. This I'm calling the V2. And I think those are a collaboration between Lee and somebody else, and I also think they went away from this design entirely on the inside. If you look at the bottom portion of the one that's partially open over here, there's a bit of a lip on either side, and I believe they went to what most of us are more familiar with balls and springs and detents, is what my guess is. But those are very, very pricey. These are pricey, and there's issues with this that we'll go into very shortly. But those things there, the version 2s, just to give you an idea, they land anywhere between $310 and $550. So I think you're paying for the fancy inlay work on there. God, I would hope it would work better than this thing does for that kind of price. But back to this. So I thought it was a little tight at first, and then I realized it was really sticking if I got it anywhere off course. If it went anywhere, if the top portion became a little bit skewed from the bottom portion just a little bit, it would want to catch. So in other words, if I twist this top part, if I just move it back and forth, it slides perfectly fine. Well, not perfectly, but well enough, let's say. If I twist this, put the slightest amount of force on it and try to slide it back and forth, all of a sudden it is sticky as fuck, and it's not a lot of force at all. I mean, it goes out of alignment in the simple act of using it in your hand, and you can feel it gets too tight to move if you squeeze on it sometimes. And in my attempts to fix that, I've put Teflon tape here, 2 strips on this to try and separate these. You can see it's worn these down a little bit, made a little bit of a mark there where it actually cleaned up the surface. And then I put a piece on the inside that you can probably barely see there, because the mechanism rubs against the internal back surface of this, which is okay, I guess, but I thought maybe that was causing it to tighten up. That was all before I realized that it was the fact that if it gets out of alignment, that's really what makes it stick. And what we'll do tonight is the first thing I want to do is show you the insides of it, and then we'll take it apart, and we'll take off these two. Well, first we'll take off this middle piece, the Teflon on the inside, and see if that has any effect, if it made any difference at all. And then we'll try taking off these 2 little strips of Teflon and see if that made any difference at all. But the real culprit is this channel and what I call the carriage piece that slides up and down in that channel. So we'll talk about that too. So just to clarify a little bit further, these that I showed up in the corner at the intro, I would call the V1. And I believe they're all set up the same as this. And what we have here inside of this is this, which you'll see in a few minutes. And that's one of the reasons this photo that you're looking at now is one of the only internal shots I could find of this when it was early on. And I looked at it, I thought, plastic everywhere, plastic internals, plastic ratchet pieces. I just thought cheap, cheap, cheap. It doesn't look very well made, and I just thought, I'm not dumping the kind of money they're after into this. And I held off on it, and I'm glad I did. But that doesn't change things. I still think that this one, like I said, it'll work well enough if you're just a simple user. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 clicks in either direction. They're barely there, and that's one of the problems with this slider is there are no interchangeable springs. There's just 2 springs. They're super tiny. They're like a little over 1 millimeter in diameter. We can try to measure them if I remember. There were no other strength springs to try with it, and because of their size, they're too small. You can't try any normal 3 millimeter springs that we find in many of our other mechanical sliders. So you can't adjust it, you can't tune it. That takes a heck of a lot of the fun out of it. And then the fact that they just didn't do a good job on the machining, I think, is really what's leading to this. Otherwise, it would be a fairly smooth running slider, and I would say, well, it's just very weak. It's very, I have sliders that are set up to be barely, you could say barely there, or the clicks are barely audible, or not very tangible, I guess. But no, the way this sticks, I just can't see paying what they want for it. Now, just to give you an idea what you'll find this for, I'm assuming that all those V1s that I showed you in the intro shot and just previously there, that they're probably all like this. They all do have the same mechanical construction. Now, did they learn any? Did they find out that they fucked it up and improved their machining since they made this one? I don't know. That's one of the problems with these companies in China. But anyhow, if you want to buy one in stainless steel, in INS Works wants $120. That's what this is. If you want one in Thai, they want $140. And on the higher end of that, if you look around on AliExpress, like if you weren't fortunate enough to find a better price, if you went for the highest price, some people are asking $255 for this. And in titanium, $300, and zirconium, $340. And I don't know. Certainly not worth it to me. I sure am glad I got it for 30 bucks. So yeah, let's just go through the normal routine here. All right, let's do some comparisons, then we'll do weights and measurements, and then we'll take it apart. Right off the top, we got the top B from Metal Toys DZ. We're not going to go through a ton of comparisons. Here's the Mackie CP3. Sorry, I should put my hand behind there because I know it can be hard to see with that dark background that I use. Now, this happens to be, I got this from the same fella, Kyle, Mr. Kyle Spencer. This happens to be virtually the same size. The outside radiuses are a little bit different. And the height is just a hair taller on this one. But if you happen to have a Cosmo mechanical, they're roughly the same size. See, this one's not very loud either. And I'm not bitching about that, but it doesn't have issues. This does have some drawbacks, but you should watch my video about that if you want to know those details. Overall, I'm okay with it. I like it enough. Excellent price from a good friend. This, well, I'm happy. He said he didn't even. I think he took it apart and sort of figured out that it couldn't be tuned, and he said he didn't even want to take it any further than that. He just wanted to get rid of it. So, like I said, 30 bucks. I was willing to take my chances on whether this thing was garbage or not. I just wanted to see it and try it out and everything. So, sorry I got off track there again, but here we go. My last comparison will be the Sky Tower. Somewhat bigger and thicker. Okay. Let's go ahead and weigh it. There are no magnets in it, so it's about 67 grams. Again, this is the stainless steel version. Titanium and zirconium would be lighter than that, I think. Measurements. 48 millimeters tall, 20 millimeters wide, a little hair over 10 millimeters thick. And when it's extended, we are at 64 millimeters. Okay, we have 2 Torx bits, a T8 for the larger screw on the inside, and T6 for the 4 smaller screws on the outside. Let's go ahead and take those out. While you're doing this, hold everything together in this manner. The springs are so small on this, it's an absolute miracle that I haven't lost them yet. They've sprung off, one of them shot off into the distance at least 4 times now, and luckily it was in the corner of my room here, and somehow, miraculously, I found it each time. So, once that's unscrewed, you can lift off this cap, but that's where you have to be real careful. I'm gonna flip it over because I forgot which side was the top. So this is the top, but the moment you take this off, I've just lifted it up a little bit there now. The moment you take that off, you're susceptible to spring loss. So I'm gonna cover these up quite quickly, and I'm gonna get it up here close to the camera for you to see. You probably saw in that photo, and I'll show you again in that photo, but if I'm very careful here, there are 2 very tiny springs, and one of them was way too loose, so I was forced to stretch it out a little bit, and I deformed it a little bit, and when I try to put it back in here now, it wants to kink up and pop out, so that makes it even worse for me, and I have no replacements, and I don't know where I'd even find any. Now I want to make sure that those don't come out on me. What we're going to do here, like I said, is we'll try taking this off first and see if that makes any difference. But I don't want this to get out of hand on me here, so I'll take my other slider and just use that as a safety precaution. Put it over top of those springs to make sure they don't go anywhere. I'm paranoid about it. Hold up 1 second, I gotta get my trusty Swiss Army knife. Okay, there we go. One of the most useful pocket knives you could ever have. I've had one on my keychain forever. I don't think this was doing any good, so I'm just gonna take it off. This was just some extra Teflon tape that I had left over from probably a carbon fiber carbon fiber slider that I'd gotten a while ago. Well, I buggered that up. That is some really strong tape. Okay, there we go. Okay, well, now that that's out of the way, I'll be able to show you in the reflection. Let me get that last little bit of tape out of there. So you can see how that carriage piece has been riding up and down and scratching up that surface. That's how it's designed, but I thought maybe that had something to do with the scraping issue. So let's see. Let's put it back together and see if that made any difference at all. Again, I want to be careful not to lose these springs. Okay, I'm going to flip that over. just OCD about things. I want my leads to be on the same direction. Okay, let me just put a screw in, one on each side temporarily, just so I can get a feel for this. Okay, do I think that made any difference? Actually, yeah, I wouldn't bother putting tape on the inside, I don't think, because I don't think that made any difference at all. It's still sticking for me, but it's only because of the twisting issue. Now we'll try taking off these two pieces of tape here. I think this was smooth enough to begin with, but I put them in there to see if they'd make any difference. They do seem to help take up a little bit of the space. This has sort of a sloppy tolerance to it, so, you know, I think right now, if I hold this together and sort of tap the sides, we'll compare that once I take the tape out and see how sloppy it is after we take that out. This is going to be a slightly long one, friends. I hope you don't mind. Hope you enjoyed anyhow. If I lose those springs, we might just call it quits. Okay, next operation is to remove that tape, which means taking everything out. Okay, and now I also need a safety pin. I think that's the best way to do it, and I didn't bring it with me. I'll be right back. Okay, here we go. Nice little safety pin. Make sure it don't go anywhere, please. Get that out of the picture when we don't need it. So I found the best way to get these springs out is to use just a safety pin and actually slide them onto the pin. So try to focus. That might give you an idea of the size of the springs. Very, very small. Let's give a rough dimension on those. They are about 1.5 millimeter diameter. And now we can't really rely on this length, but I suppose if you were trying to order replacements, these appear to be about 5 millimeters long. If you can get them a little bit longer, I'd get a little bit longer because those aren't very strong. Okay, now that I have my springs secured onto a safety pin, put that off to the side. Now, get a little bit of a better look here. See, this slides nice and free until it gets cocked to one side or the other. And then it gets very, very sticky. And let's finish taking it apart. You have to be careful too, I should say. Once those springs are out, there's now two small pieces. One runs across here, one runs across here. They're both loose little pieces of steel. And they have to go in a certain way. There's only one way they will go in. And then the springs have to go in. And the fact that these are loose adds to the fun when you go to try to put the springs back in, because they're resting and pushing against these things. I think we'll just keep those off to the side right now. And we'll switch to the T8 and remove the middle screw. Okay. Now everything just comes apart. Here's the bottom piece. I don't quite understand the writing on there. You can read it. It's blank, and that says number 19G/ING Lee Studio. So I don't know. Doesn't matter. This is what I call a carriage piece. And what's actually rubbing I can give you a profile shot of that. See how that's shaped? That rests down in this groove. So if I take that and I lay it down in there, you see it fits and slides there. Well, where those two pieces come together, on these edges on the inside, and on these edges where they make contact, when I zoom in on those two surfaces, the two friction surfaces, the machining is visibly, you can't feel anything. You can't really feel anything. And to the naked eye, it's not that obvious. But when you look at it under the microscope, you can see little ridge lines. So the machining, you know, I think the term for that might be called shatter. And I'm sure these are CNC machined, but I mean, it's a sign that you're either taking off too much material or you're taking too fast of a pass. So it's either your feed or your speed is too high. And you get these little ripples. Instead of a nice smooth cut, you get these little uniform ripple marks. And it's the same on this inside surface in here. And that's why when it becomes caulked one way or the other, those little ripples, and I'll have to show you what I'm trying to, I'll have to sketch it out for you. So, real quick, we have this surface. This is the track that it runs in. This is the carriage. And when you zoom in on the microscope, you've actually got a surface that's a bit like this, and a surface that's a bit like this. It's almost like little teeth. So it's not smooth at all. And when this part here, which is supposed to travel back and forth that way and that way, gets caulked to the sideway, gets caulked to the either side on your way going forward or back, these really lock up. And I think the only way around that is to polish the hell out of this surface, this surface, this surface, and this surface. Because I thought if I take sandpaper to it, well, that's even worse. I have some fine grained sandpapers and stuff, but it works good enough right now. I don't want to ruin it completely. Taking sandpaper to it might just ruin it completely. I'm going to, and we'll try to get it on video a little bit maybe. If it works, it works. If it doesn't, it doesn't. But I'm going to try to polish. All I have is, what's it called? Mother's polish or something. There's a funny mother's name to it. But I have some of that, and I have a Dremel, a battery-powered Dremel charging up downstairs. We will take it and work over this edge, work over this edge, and work over this inside edge and this inside edge. And then we'll put it all back together and see how it works. And while we're there, we'll get rid of this tape. But we won't be able to know how well that works until we put the whole thing back together again. So I'll try to remember to update you on that when we get to that point. But now we're at a point where I think I'm ready to do some polishing, which I'm not looking forward to. We'll see if it makes any difference. Well, I don't even really have the right kind of polish. This is for magnesium and aluminum. Hopefully it'll do something. Like I said, I don't want to take sandpaper to this and ruin it. I'm just going to go down this corner, inside this corner, both surfaces, and try to get that smoothed up on both sides. And then when we get to this, I'm just going to try to get right in here and right in here. So I won't make you watch me do the whole thing, but it's going to be a bit messy. Oh, good, it's picking up. See, it's getting dirty already. It's a good sign. The polish is actually removing some material. Maybe this will make a difference. Okay, I'll bring you back in a little bit when I start that. Well, I haven't been at it for very long, but I can tell you one thing. That's a very shiny surface now, and this used to be all white. Look how black that is, and my fingertips too. So it took off a considerable amount of material. Hopefully it smoothed off the edges. Now I'm going to move on to doing these inside surfaces in here. So let's bring it down to a low speed again. Well, that's as much as I'm going to do. I got a lot of material off there. You can see it all over my fingers. This thing's totally black now. Whoops. So hopefully that made a difference. Okay, here we are back at the table. I didn't shine up the whole piece. I didn't try to get everything cleaned up. Just those inside edges we talked about. And they do appear to be a bit shinier, although I could see in the reflection that these two very inner surfaces in here are still a bit rough looking and could probably use some more attention. But let's just see if this improved anything. So to put this back together again, and this is the bottom part, you'll want to put this on top, and this drops down in there and rests in that little indentation right here. So it'll lock into place sort of, but you need to screw it in. So we will put on the T8 bit, put that screw back in. Okay, snug that down, make sure everything's running smooth. See if it feels any. It might be a little bit smoother. Let's put the rest of the way together. So this is a little bit of a tricky part to put in. These pieces, you see they have a bump in the middle. That bump corresponds with these teeth on the top part or the bottom part. And then when it comes to putting it in this way or putting it in this way, you'll have to eye that up yourself. If it's a little bit difficult, I'll try to point it out to you here. There's a part that's shaped like an L right here, and a part that's shaped like an L right here. So this one goes up and over, and that little L part, the inside corner of that L, is where you want to have the smaller tip of this plastic piece. So it's going to be going in. Well, I can't quite do it that way. It's going to be going in like this. I can get it in the light for you. So I'm just going to take it and drop it down in there. Easier said than done, but at least that side's done. And it's the same thing on the other side. It'll only go in one way. So that, again, the thin pointy end goes to the inside corner of the L. Whoops. I'd have been better off using tweezers here, I think. Okay, now they're back in. Now, the hard part and the scary part is putting the tiny springs back into this location and this location, and then getting the lid back on without hearing a spring go ting. So I'm going to just do these one at a time. I'm I'm going to do the good spring first. That one's a little kinked. That's the one I stretched out a little bit, which I probably shouldn't have done. I think it's easiest to use the pin to help you put them back in as well. So I'm just sort of getting into position there, and I'm going to use my fingernail to run it down the length of the pin. And now that spring is in place. You'll be able to see that or not, but it's in there. I don't want it to fly out. A good way to get it to fly out too would be to be moving this. See how this part moves around? It's moving those ratchet parts up and down, and the spring up and down too. So don't be moving it around when you're doing that. Here is the other spring. Keeping that good spring that's in there covered up at all times so it doesn't shoot off into the distance. And then we'll go cross our fingers and try to put the second one in. Doesn't feel like it went in. I think it did. Okay, it's in. Now, which side? Lee is facing upward. Okay, everything's good to go. All I have to do now, put the lid back on, put the screws back in, can't believe we did that without losing a damn spring. It could be the last time I take this apart for a while, honestly. If it wasn't for you good people, I would not go through all this trouble. Actually, I would have, especially if I'd have paid 120 bucks for it. Not only would I have gone through all this trouble, but I'd have been a hell of a lot more unhappy about it. Okay, big moment. Okay, I consider this to be the bottom, although this is the heavier side, and it does have a decorative part there. They could consider this to be the top, but I sort of consider this to be the top. So let's see. You know what? Let me just give her a couple runs here. It's getting a little, there, it's kind of stuck on me. You know what? I think it's improved a little bit, but it does work enough. Like I said, I don't want to ruin it. Maybe someday I'll come back and hit this with the polish and the Dremel tool for a considerable amount of time. I don't think it's made too much of a difference. So be advised, you know, if you're okay with this, the way it's operating, then by all means, put 120 bucks on a stainless steel one. Otherwise, maybe check out the version 2 from Lee. And again, that's the version 2. Difference being that different mechanism altogether on the inside, plus much higher price and a fancier inlaid plate. So I think that's it. If you have any questions, please leave them in the comments. I'll get back to you as soon as I can. Thanks for watching. Bye.